The One Piece trading card game's latest set out in the West, Royal Blood, OP10, is scheduled to come out later this week. You may have participated in a couple release events, tried to win some buggies, probably didn't pull anything good, but for those of you that maybe want to round out your playsets or are wondering what is good in the set, what should you be getting, right? Whether that's people posting in the buy, sell, trade sections of the Discord, being able to build a variety of meta decks, etc. I've got this video here for you. I'm going to go over every single card that you should buy in this set, the amount that you should buy, and kind of the importance of the cards. I've been doing this the last couple sets, so I have a document in the description below, a Google Doc, that you can check out if you want to look at the past sets of the buy list. I still have to put in OP05 and older, but at least from OP06 to OP10. We'll start off with the tier 1 category of the cards that I think that you should just have on hand at any time that these become popular. And the first one I'll talk about is Virgo, right? Virgo, a 1-drop searcher for the Punk Hazard type, is really nice, especially when you talk about this set introducing lots of Punk Hazard items. Smoker is probably the key leader that is attached to this card as of right now, but we also have another Punk Hazard leader in Caesar Clown, and who knows, maybe in the future more Punk Hazard types will come about. And I just generally think 1-drop searchers are pretty much always tier 1. You should always get every single searcher, whether that's an event card or a 1-drop, you know. Now Sanji is a really good SR in this set. This is played in just about every single red deck that I see. Right on your turn, this character gaining 3,000 power is so nice. You don't have to invest any Dawn to be able to swing with this, and it's a 3-cost character, so you're going to be able to play this down and establish essentially a 6,000 power body on your second turn, whether you go first or second. And anytime that it's KO'd, it's basically going to replace itself in hand, and with a 1k counter, this in my opinion is a really good card to have. The Tony Chopper is also a really good staple in just a lot of different red decks, right? Anything that has a Straw Hat Crew type searcher, right? Being able to play this blocker and on opponent's turn be a 6,000 power blocker is so good. You see this in not only the red-green smoker, but you also see this in something like Shanks, right? Especially with Shanks' leader effect of minusing 1,000 power on one of your opponent's characters during an attack. It puts this Tony Chopper in a really cool position where you can utilize leader effect to minus 1,000, maybe put it down to a 5,000, and then you have a free block with this blocker. It's also a 2k counter as well, so especially in decks that are looking for more Straw Hat Crew or Punk Hazard 2Ks, this is a really good one. So Monet, we really saw this character and this SR in the set shine later in the kind of EBO2 era with the red-green smoker really pushing its way through the finals. I think that this is also kind of just a good generic red card, right? You're able to reutilize 2 rested Dawn, putting them on either your character or your leader to be able to give basically an extra 2,000 power to, and on top of that, using that effect can minus 1,000 on a character. So you're basically power scaling like a 3,000 power difference on an attack. That can be really good. Let's say your opponent has an 8,000 power character on the other side of the field that has attacked and you want to KO it, but you only have a 5,000 power character ready to attack. At the beginning of your turn, if you play the Monet down, right, give those 2 rested Dawn to your character, that 5,000 power character, putting it up to 7,000, and then the 8,000 power character gets knocked down 7, you basically matched right there and are able to have equal scaling in power without the use of any other Dawn attachments or manipulation of any kind. This is a really cool SR. I really like it. I wasn't super hype on it when it was first revealed, but seeing it played in action can give a lot of really good strategies to red. We'll go over more red cards in a bit, but Smoker is introducing the tier 1 green cards. This is just a generically good green card. I've seen this this in so many different green lists, right? Not only being a 5/7 with Banish, but on that activate main, being able to restand one of your Dawn cards as active, like I mentioned, with the Monet in a sense, being able to reutilize your Dawn, right? Going ahead of that 10 Dawn maximum limit that you have, and instead pushing upwards in the 11, 12 Smoker, the red-green deck, doing 13 Dawn turns. Although this doesn't have counter on it, we have plenty of ways in decks to be able to get rid of it out of our hand, and this is definitely a problem that decks have to deal with, right? As a base 7,000 power character, are you going to give up 2 cards from your hand, or are you just going to let 1 life go? There's a lot of value that you have to think about when facing off against this card and it's swinging at you, and it's a really big deal. It's going to be a really good one that you'll see in a lot of green decks. Tashigi's another great SR in here, a 2K, so another one of those Punk Hazard Navy 2Ks that you can search for, and even though its 3/4 stat line in the cost and attack is not insanely valuable, this effect of when one of your green characters other than Tashigi would be removed from play due to your opponent's effects, you may instead rest this character, forcing your opponents to have to instead battle your different green characters on the field. This is especially a lot more valuable, I think, with the removal of something like Ice Age in the format, right, being banned, because your opponent's going to have to expend more resources to be able to remove different characters on the field, especially since you're probably not swinging with this Tashigi ever. Anytime you face any sort of, well, really every color can have some sort of removal now at this point. I feel like it's not even an identity anymore, right? This is a blanket effect over anything. This is being removed from play, put back in life, right, with the Charlotte Lin 9 costs. This is against the blue, right? Using a Gum Gum Red Hawk to bottom deck one of your characters. This is black, right? Being able to KO, right? Reducing the cost and KOing, or even trashing, right? If you face like the 5 cost Tashigi in the Smoker deck, this can stop the Tashigi effect. It forces a lot of these decks to, instead of facing those big boss monster green characters that are so valuable in your deck, to instead focus their attention on getting rid of this Tashigi. This one's so good. I would buy these. Well, once prices calm down. I would not buy these until the set actually releases and, you know, we get some calming down going on in the TCG player listings. But yes, essentially, you should buy 4 of this. Now, Cavendish, right? Even though the ban list really hurt Usopp, I still think of this as a tier 1 character, right? With that, when attacking, draw 2, trash 1, it's really nice to be able to essentially cycle your hand and continuously draw, especially as a 4/6 as well. When you talk about Rebecca decks, you talk about Usopp decks, leaders that have these pseudo rush kind of characters with the Kurita Coliseum, this Cavendish can get immediate value on the field. I really love this guy. I've even seen this played in Nami decks, right? Especially when you talk about matchups like Blackbeard. If this Cavendish were able to survive the turn that it is played, it can immediately punish your opponent. Now, big strong man right here, Kairos, however you pronounce it. This 7 cost 9,000 power character returns any 5 cost or lower character to the owner's hand, especially in decks like Usopp. That's where this one really shines, but you see a lot of utilization with this guy in plenty of other blue decks, whether that's the Now in something like Boa Hancock loving this card, right? Bouncing a character back and maybe being able to utilize your leader effect. So nice. A 7/9 stat line is really good if this gets to stick on the field, and a 7 cost, especially with Ice Age gone and Rygo as well, there's there's a decent chance that this guy is going to be able to swing in the incoming turns. Bodies are going to stick a little bit longer in this upcoming format, I feel like, but you're even starting to see in the future in OP11 blue-purple Luffy decks starting to play this card, right? Decks that ramp and have that blue synergy to play this guy out earlier, or maybe even play off a 9 cost Sanji, right? Still provides a ton of value, especially as blockers outside of the 8-drop Katakuri, talking about the OP11 format, don't really eclipse higher than 5. I've also got Sabo on here for the Revolutionary Army Dressrosa decks, right? Not only is it a 2k ready to attack at 5,000 power, but I think this effect is really interesting. If one of your characters other than Sabo with an original cost of 7 or lower would be removed from the board by your opponent's effects, you may instead return this character to your hand. Similar to the Tashigi, this has a lot of strengths to utilize. We just talked about Kyros, right, being a 7-cost character, so if you've got this guy on the field, no matter the cost manipulation against something like black decks, a blanket effect of removal in general, similar to the examples I gave during the explanation of Tashigi, you could actually just bounce this to your hand, even arguably better than the Tashigi, right? Because the Tashigi, right, it gets rested and, you know, they may swing into it and KO it because it's only a 4,000 power character. You're probably not defending too much of it. But for this one, you get to put a 2k back in your hand for counter. That's crazy. This is even stronger, in my opinion, than the Tashigi effect and really forces your opponents to really go in at that if they don't want to battle for whatever reason. This guy's so good. This guy, Leo, is a very interesting new series of 1-drop searchers that we're seeing in the One Piece trading card game, being able to look at the top 5 but have extra effects alongside it, right? This is actually 2 Dressrosa type cards that you can grab off of that top 5 search, and then after that you have to trash 1 card from your hand. This is really, really good for filtering purposes, and as well grabbing too. You can grab a variety of things. You can grab a card that you can play next turn, as well as a 2k. You could just grab 2 2ks. You can grab a card that just might be Dressrosa that you pitch anyways to not necessarily gain more information to your hand for your opponent. There's a lot of really cool things that this guy utilizes to Dressrosa type engines that I think are really, really cool, and I hope they kind of play around with 1-drop searchers like this more in the future. Now, Rebecca, I really only see Rebecca being played in Usopp decks, right? Because with this condition of having a cost 8 or greater character in play, the Usopp automatically, on the time that you play this Rebecca card, automatically makes her an 8-cost character to fit this condition. Now, I will say she definitely is a worse Gecko because you got to play these 2 7-cost or lower Dressrosa type characters from your hand instead of your trash, but it's still a really, really cool effect in my opinion. It has a really, really cool synergy to play a 7/4. Right, we oftentimes see Kyros and Zoro, the Zoro we'll talk about later, but also replaces itself in its hand. So really, you're only losing 2 cards in hand instead of 3 on this play. It is a 7-cost 4,000 power character though, so you do have to invest some Dawn to attack, but this Rebecca is no slouch. This Rebecca still packs a pretty heavy punch. Another 1-drop searcher in the Sanji. This is going to be really, really good for you Reiju fans, right? Being a Germa type searcher. This one is leader lock though, which is really interesting because it's not like that this is grabbing 2 cards from the top 5 or maybe putting the rest in the trash, right, which would have pretty good synergy with the Germa deck, but this is just grabbing a Germa card like any other searcher. So although this is somewhat nerfed compared to a lot of other 1-drop searchers, I still think that this is pretty valuable because this is something that the Reiju deck loves and definitely needs, especially heading into this OP10 format. It's definitely an inclusion and something that, especially maybe with the ban list that's come out, I don't know, is Reiju better? Reiju is definitely better, but I don't know how much better. It's definitely worth testing. You've also got the Sugar here, and Sugar, very, very nice for Donquixote Pirates types, especially for green, purple Doflamingo. Now you have 8 searches that you can utilize for the Donquixote engine. This is the classic play 1 and then rest 1 alongside this character, right? Similar to like Jewelry Bonnie, Baby 5 that we've seen in a lot of these different lists. So whether you're a green purple Dofi fan, a Sugar fan, or anything in between, make sure you've got this searcher. I think Senior Pink could definitely find its way into a couple different purple decks that aren't just Donquixote Pirates engines. Not only a 5/6 being a respectable stat line right in the middle of the game, but being able to add any purple event card with the cost of 5 or less from the trash into the hand and then restand Dawn, right? We constantly talk about reutilizing Dawn cards to give more value to your later stages of the game, and Senior Pink does that as well, being able to add more cards onto the field, as well as grabbing valuable event cards later, right? This can synergize with one of the best cards in the game, Gum Gum Giant. You could start seeing this being teched into different decks, especially anything that does play the Gum Gum Giant, right? Being able to grab that and play it down again can provide so much value. I think this card's really, really interesting. I feel like we haven't seen, at least in the Eastern meta, its full potential as of yet, and I definitely think that this is one that you're going to want to hold on to, right? It may not be insanely impactful now, but I think in the future it'll be pretty good. Now, Donquixote Doflamingo, I think, is kind of on the cusp of the tier 1, tier 2 category. The other SR in this color we'll talk about later, I think, is a little bit more deserving of the tier 1 category, but I think that this is still pretty doggone good. 8 cost, 9,000 power, a respectable stat line that we've seen across plenty of SRs, including the recently banned Gecko Moria, right? Has a similar on-play effect where you can play out and cheat another body, right? This being a 5 cost or lower Donquixote Pirates type character from your hand. There's plenty of good 5 cost out there in the realm, especially in the Donquixote Pirates typing that you can synergize this with, and cheating out bodies, swarming, it's kind of the name of the game for a lot of decks right now in the format. I mean, that's how Doflamingo was so successful, right? It does have a second effect though. On opponent's turn, once per turn, you can rest one of your Dawn and add up to 1 active Dawn from your Dawn deck. This can be really, really nice, right? To be able to re-ramp. If you're playing this on an 8 Dawn turn, and let's say you Dawn -1, maybe you can also use Gavel as well, I don't know, in a turn, or something that Dawn minuses for in a counter attack of some sort or something. You can use this Doflamingo if you have 1 Dawn, right, still active on the opponent's turn. You could just go ahead and utilize that to re-ramp yourself. Could be really, really nice. I think that this is an interesting card that could see its way into other decks, right? Just the second effect alone is really, really good. You've also got the Rosinante here. Rosinante, I feel like, is a better card than the Doflamingo, at least as of right now. I feel like I've seen it in more decks as of late. This is a 5 cost, 6,000 power, so perfect synergy with that 8 cost like I was talking about earlier. Navy Donquixote Pirates. On play, you can trash 1 event card from your hand and draw 2 cards, right? If you've got an event card that you really do not need, right, it's irrelevant in the matchup, or maybe just doesn't fit with what you've got going in your deck or on that turn, you can go ahead and just draw 2 cards instead, kind of filtering your hand a little bit. And especially if you're a Senior Pink kind of deck, right, you can trash that 1 event card and go get it later. And then especially at the later stages of the game, right, when you're on 7 Dawn or more in your turn, at the end of turn you can restand 2 Dawn to use for maybe 1 of your event cards, so you can use all of your Dawn and then go ahead and restand. I've seen this in a couple different decks. I think I've even started to see this in blue purple Luffy, right, which is definitely a tier 0 deck right now running around in the Eastern meta. So I will go ahead, grab a playset of these. I don't know if you'll need a playset for that deck specifically, but you'll want a playset for other decks that may appear, because I think that this could be a playset in a couple different things. Now, this card right here, this might debatably be the best card in this set, being this Kuzan, right? If you've been around the channel and you've seen like some tournament commentary videos, you've seen us talking about the meta in general, this card is so good and is an auto inclusion in Blackbeard, right? Being able, not only it can't be removed by an effect, so it has the similar protection effect as the Jesus Burgess, but even better, right? Because you can't bottom deck it, you can't put it in life, right? Can't put it back in an opponent's hand. It just can't be removed from the field by effects. So this card's absolutely broken. And then on top of that, You can trash the character, draw one card, so it replaces itself in your hand. One of the problems with Blackbeard is it runs out of cards in hand, right? The draw, in terms of keeping the hand size healthy and alive, is sometimes really difficult, right? Helps out with that, replaces itself in your hand, and then, you know, if your Jesus Burgess got milled earlier or got KO'd in battle, just bring it right back, right? And it stays in as active, doesn't come in as rested, comes in as active. This card is insane. I really wonder why they printed this. They definitely wanted Blackbeard to be good right after making this card, but this is one that you're gonna want to play set of, and also is probably one that you want to wait a little bit, right? Wait until after release and more hit the market to buy this card, because I think this is one of the more expensive pre-sale SRs. You've also got the Frankie here, right? This Frankie is an interesting addition. It probably goes down a little bit because of the Gecko Moria band, right? Something like the black purple Luffy kind of struggles a little bit more to utilize this, but especially for you Usopp fans in here, this is a great card because on KO you can play a 3-cost or lower Dressrosa type character from your trash, which a lot of times is another blocker, whether that's the Ideo, the 2-drop, or the Bartolomeo, right? The 3-cost 2k that you may have trashed earlier as counter. This Frankie can bring back another blocker for future turns, or maybe have some setup type characters, right? If you've got like a 3-cost vanilla is there a 3-cost Dressrosa vanilla that's like 5,000? But point being, there's a lot of cool stuff that you can utilize with this card in Usopp decks, right? Bring back different characters, and on KO can also include blocking and losing a battle, right? And especially as most all times you're gonna have to swing 5,000 at a leader, most any swing, especially going at life, is going to bring you the possibility of letting this get KO'd to be able to use its effect. Now, Roronoa Zoro, right? I mentioned that the Kuzan is the #1 best card in the set. Zoro might be #2, right? A 4/6, which is a really good stat line, has the ability of KOing a cost that is the same as it is, right? A 4-cost KOing another 4-cost or lower, while also building up the trash in your deck. This is especially good if you've already set up Kurita Coliseum, right? Because you do have to rest a Dressrosa leader or stage. If you've got that stage in play and maybe you're doing like a Rebecca play, playing out this guy alongside Kiros can remove 2 bodies at once, right? A 5-cost or less and a 4-cost or less. So good, and you still have the ability to maybe swing with your leader, swing with the Kiros, right? If it comes in as active, then 9,000 if you have the Kurita Coliseum in field, because the Kurita Coliseum gives the pseudo rush effect whether it's active or rested. So great synergy. Now, I'm very happy that this is limited to Dressrosa type leaders or stages, but it's a big reason why people value those decks, right? It has a lot of damage that it can do. Now, Liberation. Liberation is really interesting, right? Because a lot of people have speculated with Doflamingo's Jinbei getting banned. Do you still need Liberation in your deck? And I think especially with the coming up of stuff like Zoro, Bello Betty, right? These rush decks and Swarm still being a factor, right? Pluffy being much more powerful. You can still utilize this Liberation event. I don't know. One of the things is I don't know if you need a full playset of this. I think you can maybe get away with only owning 3. I feel like a lot of different Blackbeard decks, I see either 2 or 3 because they're still fitting in stuff like Finger Pistol. Now, with the opportunity gone to utilize Ice Age, right, something that we saw some Blackbeard decks doing, maybe that fits in a little bit more with Liberation, and then you play a whole playset. Only time will tell. This is a rare, so it's not going to be super difficult to get, but I think if you have at least 3, you're probably pretty safe. Now, going into yellow, this Capone Gang Beige is really nice for supernova based decks, right? Being able to switch out your top or bottom of your life with a supernova type character can have really good synergy with a lot of different things that you try to utilize for stuff like green, yellow Law, and Eustace Captain Kidd. If black, yellow Luffy also is going to survive in the format, we saw black, yellow Luffy's before the ban list of Gecko Moria play this Capone Gang Beige, and I thought it was really, really good, right? Has very great synergies with that 5-cost Supernova Luffy. Now, if Black Yellow Luffy is still viable to play after the Gecko ban, that is still left to be determined. But I think if it's got any chance of surviving and still being a threat within the format, this card is definitely one that is going to be included in the deck and one that you probably want to have. Basil Hawkins, a very good yellow card that honestly is played in just a lot of different yellow decks, right? Having that on KO effect of trashing one card from the top of your opponent's life, being unconditional. It's not like Kikunojo or Okiku, right, where your opponent has to have 3 or less life in order for you to gain 1. This Basil Hawkins, no matter what, as long as they have a life in general, you can trash the top one of it if this gets KO'd, right? It's a very, very sticky 4-cost 5,000 power body and really forces your opponent to either have a bottom decking effect, put back in life effect, which, by the way, putting it back in life is not great, right? Because it has a draw to trash 1 trigger on it as well. Effectively a net 1 filtering out your hand kind of card. As well as this having a 1k counter on it, you can use this for a couple different matchups. Man, this Basil Hawkins is a pretty good card. This Luffy right here continues the trend of 1-drop searchers, right? This looking for supernova types other than Luffy. I think that this is pretty good. Definitely utilized in stuff like Green, Yellow Law, and Eustace Captain Kidd, right? Primarily being supernova decks, and could just be nice if you're like any sort of yellow deck. Like, I think of Yamato potentially that may just utilize a lot of supernova cards in general. May just want to have this anyways. Now, Eustace Captain Kidd is a huge threat for yellow decks, right? That 8-9 stat line, again, talking about being pretty good. Also has essentially an unconditional, well, has kind of one condition, but you might know what I mean. Has an unconditional trash one of your opponent's top life cards. Very, very nice. You do have to rest the character though, so it does have more condition than like the Basil Hawkins, but this is an on-play effect that you can use this, and on play, you can't swing anyway, so does have a lot of value being able to trash one of your opponent's life on an 8 Dawn turn, and especially in the Eustace Captain Kidd deck, having great synergies, you're allowed to restand this character and become a 9,000 power blocker, which is so good, right? And the end of turn having great synergy with the on play as well, right? After you burn that life, if your opponent has 2 or less life, you can go ahead and filter draw 1, trash 1, right? We've seen this draw 1, trash 1 in plenty of different boss monster type characters like Jack in the format. It just proves to be like a really strong attribute that you want to obtain. This is also one of those that I think is included in just a lot of different yellow decks, right? Being able to go ahead, guarantee burn a life, but also have that filter effect can be so good in a lot of different yellow decks, right? Especially when you talk about stuff like Robin, Yamato, like I mentioned, there's a lot of possibilities with this card and how you want to play with it. X-Drake is also a really good 2K, especially for the Supernova packages and something like Enel. We saw this shine in Enel in the Japan Championship that it won. If you missed that championship run, you can go check it out on my channel, although Raigo is gone now, so that deck's a little bit different than it is right now, but anyways, this 2K counter searchable Supernova is also Navy and Drake Pirates, so does have a lot of value in a different amount of situations. Does have an activate main of resting the character. And if your life is less than or equal to the number on your opponent's side, you can rest one of their 4-cost or less characters. This can especially be good against something like the Blackbeard, right? Where if they have those pesky Burgesses, right, but they don't have a lot in the trash and it's a 5 or 6,000 power character, you can go ahead, use an activate main, right? It's not an on play. use that activate main to get rid of that Burgess off the field. Could be really, really good in a lot of different situations. I like this card. Just a really, really good uncommon to have. And then the final card of tier 1 that I'm going to talk about is this Trafalgar Law, right? This Trafalgar Law, having 3 different typings, Dressrosa, Supernova, Hard Pirates, can be utilized in a lot of different decks, both now and in the future. As a 7/9, pretty respectable stat line, has an on play of revealing a Supernova type character from your hand and adding it to your life face down. This is a 7 cost that allows you to gain a life, right? And then if you have a Supernova type leader, which by the way, we got one in this set, you can give Arrested Dawn to your leader and then go ahead, utilize the leader effect synergy. You put a Supernova character down there in the life. Well, why don't you go reveal that and maybe cheat it out on the field? Green Yellow Laws, love this card, and it's going to be one of the reasons if Green Yellow Law is really good in this post ban list OP10 format that the deck just thrives. Now we're going to move on to tier 2 decks, and this one I kind of am curious if I eventually move it to tier 1, right? Kamakura Jusoshi is a very good counter card that we see especially in Shanks. This can also be played in something like Smoker if you want to move away from something maybe like the Gum Gum Mole Pistol from Starter Deck 21. Effectively gives you a 5,000 power balance, right? Choosing a leader or character and gaining 3,000 power. You can take away one of your opponent's leaders or characters 2,000 power in the turn as a counter event as well. If you have a 9,000 power character swinging at you, right? We've talked about a couple 9,000 power characters already that are really valuable. Using this Kamakura Jusoshi is able to give your leader 8,000 power and move them down to 7,000 power in the turn, effectively getting out of the attack entirely. Very, very strong. If you've got 2 Dawn left over, maybe playing a Rayleigh or Dragon Ride being a Shanks deck. This is also really, really nice for being able to neutralize other characters on the field, right? You talk about the different swarm decks like Doflamingo, right? Maybe Purple Luffy. Purple Luffy, exceptional at putting out those 6,000 power characters in the Zorojuro and Sangoro. If you use this against that deck, right, you could put one of those 6,000 power characters to 4,000 while defending out of another attack, really helping you out in that matchup because now your Purple Luffy opponent has to put Dawn on one of those characters for the rest of the turn to be able to swing at your leader. This has a lot of really cool synergies. Divine Departure I also have in here, right? Divine Departure probably more so on the lower end of the tier 2 category because I don't see it as much as some of the other upcoming 2 effect 1-drop events. This one being able to have the ability to KO an 8,000 power or less character by resting essentially 6 Dawn can be really, really valuable. Not necessarily utilized in that way a lot, but having that flexibility can be really nice, especially as this 1-drop counter basically being a guard point. This is just honestly like a better guard point, especially if you have something like a Shanks deck, right, that utilizes maybe the 1-drop Uta Searcher to be able to find red-haired pirates type cards. This is especially one of the cards in Shanks that you're really thinking about heading into this format. Now, I've got a Nell right here because I love Lim, and I think Lim actually gets a lot better. And although most of the Lim cards that I have in this video are in kind of the tier 3 category because they're really only stuck to one deck, and that is Lim. Lim not necessarily even being a BDIF, probably not even in the top 3 decks conversation. It's definitely more niche, but I think Anel is just that much better than the rest of them because it allows you to draw 3 trash 2, right? It is a net 0 kind of card, a hand filtering type of card, also has Sky Island, so if we ever see green Sky Island packages, this is going to be a good one that you want to utilize, especially because in the limb deck that you only need to have one other rested character on the field at the time that you play this to be able to have that draw 3 trash 2 means that you can use this really early if you utilize something like the 1-drop limb or 1-drop Trafalgar Law. Now this one may surprise a lot of people, but hear me out. The weak don't get to choose how they die. It's a 5-cost event with the flexibility of main or counter, where you can KO up to one of your opponent's rested characters with cost of 7 or less. The reason that I'm saying hear me out on this card, I don't think that you need a playset of this, even though it's a common, you're going to get a playset pretty easily. This has the Punk Hazard, Supernova, and Hard Pirates typing, especially in something like Red-Green Smoker, being able to reutilize Dawn pretty effectively, and also in Supernovas, right, when you have stuff like Cavendish in format. I could see this being put into decks, especially in something like Red-Green Smoker, being able to restand 3 Dawn with the 5-drop Smoker and the Leader Smoker effects to basically make this a 2-cost event can be so good, right? I generally, this is my like going out on a prayer kind of card, but I really think that this has a lot of value. I think that this is a good one to like keep in your back pocket. Now I've seen this Odyssey once or twice, right, in different Dressrosa type decks. It's just a nice searchable 2K in Dressrosa packages, but I think one of the big reasons on this card is utilizing with like the special rare OP10 Monkey D. Luffy, right? Being able to give that Monkey D. Luffy banish until the end of the turn could be really nice of trying to burn out your opponent's life, right? Especially because that Luffy has a restand type of effect. You can do a lot of damage with just this 2 Dawn, right? All you have to do is just rest a Dressrosa leader or stage with Corrida Coliseum, right? We talked about earlier. This, okay, maybe this is also my call out in the tier 2 category of, well, hear me out here. But again, this is a common. You're going to be able to get this pretty easily. You probably don't need any more than 2 of them, but it's a 2K that I've seen in some Usopp decks, and I think is one that you should consider when trying to deck build for this upcoming format. Now, follow me and I will guide you all. This could be really nice if maybe you don't want to do the whole Leo thing, right, of resting a stage or leader. Maybe you have some consistency issues and stuff like that. So this is a nice card to be able to utilize where you don't have to maybe filter the hand and you don't have to rest any of your stages or leaders if you want to do that later in the turn. This is definitely like outside of the 50, right? Like if you have a list of cards, this is definitely in the mid 50s to 60s of cards that you want in the deck. But if you're having a lot of problems with Leo, or maybe you just want more search in general, then this is another option. Just a 1-drop searcher event, right? It's not a body on the field. It doesn't have counter on it, but being able to search and also have a trigger effect to then search is pretty all right. I can never forgive anyone who laughs at my family. Similar to that last card that we talked about, this is a searcher event, right? This is really nice for Donquixote Pirates cards and has the flexibility of using main or counter. One of the reasons why this is only a top 3 search instead of a top 5, but if your deck is primarily Donquixote Pirates, you probably don't really have anything to worry about. I know that this is especially good in Sugar and might be a nice good starting card for stuff like Green Purple Dofi. Now we've got Shiryu here. Shiryu is definitely a card that has gained more and more value as time has gone on for Blackbeard decks. Really started seeing this appear more in Blackbeard decks later in the OP10 meta, and it looks like that it might be potentially one that you may want to consider tier 1. So I think that this is probably one of the better tier 2s out there, but I don't see it in every deck list for Blackbeard. But this is definitely like a 52, 51 kind of card that you want in your deck. Not only being able to be a 7,000 power character on opponent's turn, very hard to get rid of in terms of just battle, but being able to KO a 3 cost or less when you have certain minusing effects in the deck with something like Von Augur, right, can just be really, really valuable. It is a nice card to include in the deck, and I'm not going to try to knock on it too much. Now, Jewelry Bonnie, a really nice kind of blocker. Why is this a full art, by the way? But anyways, is a really nice blocker to be able to utilize in green, yellow Law. Also may have some nice synergies with supernova typings, and as yellow Bonnie pirates, if we see maybe a Jewelry Bonnie yellow leader in the future, could be a really, really good starting point for setting up that deck in general. We do know that Bonnie does have an impactful part of the crew in the Egghead arc, or at least that's what I've been told. I'm not caught up on the series, so it stands to believe that that's something that could happen. Oh yeah, we do have Egghead Jewelry Bonnie pirates, so who knows? Scratchman-a-Poo is another really nice blocker in there, as long as it's not the only yellow supernova character on the field not named Scratchman-a-Poo. This guy gains blockers, so a really, really nice chum blocker right here, just a nice little 1-cost block, is really, really good to be able to eat up some attacks, especially in the later game when you're trying to savor your Dawn, or maybe even in the early game when you only have like a Luffy Searcher and Scratchman-a-Poo on the field, and that's your 2 Dawn turn, right? Kind of set up the board a little bit. You also have this Zoro that is nice for the green-yellow Law deck, right? Is a Supernova Straw Hat kind of card, but especially for these supernova type decks, if your life total is fewer than your opponent's, you go ahead and gain rush. So if you've got this card in your hand early and you aggressively take life, this guy's going to be a 3-cost 5,000 power attacker that's ready to get on the field, and with the trigger of having a play this character effect, can be a real threat to your opponent a lot of times, especially if you get a more aggressive method, which honestly, post ban list, decks in general that utilize supernova packages might just naturally become more aggressive, right? Having to compete with some of the other decks that are boosting up, but the loss and downfall of some other decks like Black Yellow Luffy and Dofi. Now, Electromagnetic Cannon, we saw have a splash in the format a little bit in 10 in Nell, and I think especially if a Nell survives, it's gonna want to play this card, right? Being able to KO a 5-cost or less is a very respectable number, as well as having a trigger of draw 2, trash 1. Just really, really nice for a lot of different situations, but also has the ability on this main when you use it to look at either the top of you or your opponent's life cards and rearrange it, right? We saw Katakuri just really take Storm for a while in the format, probably about a year ago, right? Maybe a little bit longer than that. But part of the reason it was so successful was being able to manipulate where life was, whether they wanted it at the top, whether they wanted it at the bottom of either them or their opponents. So this Electromagnetic Cannon has that nice flexibility to be able to do a lot of different things. I think just kind of yellow decks in general could play this card because there's just a ton of value there. And then in the tier 2 category, I've got this other Monkey D. Luffy secret rare, right? This character also has a protection effect on your opponent's effects, right? So has a lot of nice synergies, not as good as like the Tashigi or the Sabo, but has a little bit in its own right. It is a secret rare as well with 1k counter, not something that we see a ton of a lot of times, but with the 6/7 stat line when attacking, if you place 3 cards from your trash at the bottom of your deck and your opponent has 5 or more cards in hand, you can trash one of those cards from their hand. And especially as a Dressrosa Supernova Straw Hat Pirates character, you can use this in a lot of different decks, right? You can use this in Usopp deck. You can use this in any Black Luffy deck, right? Especially when you talk about a lot of people post ban lists are talking about starter deck 14 Luffy. Now, how high is it? I'm not 100% sure, but I think a lot of people will say that, especially since Raigo and Ice Age are gone, that deck can do a lot of good stuff in this upcoming format. And we've seen, especially the Italians, cook up with it once. you could cook up with it again. Now, let's definitely speed through this tier 3 category to get this video over with. Smiley, really good for really just punk hazard type decks, right? Can do a minus 3,000 power, even though that I think Caesar Clown is absolutely trash. I don't think he's viable at all. Remember that red-green smoker does have the punk hazard typing, so it could be an option that you could utilize in a deck, right? If you feel like that you really need to do some power minusing in a lot of different situations, this could be a tech card that you can put in your deck. Could be found off of the Virgo, right, being a punk hazard typing. Also biological weapon, which could see some use in the future, I don't know. Now coming in with my beloved Lim cards, Edward Newgate is a really cool card to include in the Lim deck, right? Resting one of your characters of a cost 5 or less and then KOing a character 3 or less rested gives you the opportunity to be able to rest and KO a character at the same time, right? The same character, or maybe have a little bit of flexibility. Maybe they rest a 5 cost and then maybe you're playing against a black deck that has Brook on the field, right? You can rest a 5 cost blocker and then KO a rested Brook on the field. Can have a lot of different damage within the game. Is really only a 2 of that I see in the Lim decks, may go up to 4, right? But I think does have some value if you want to play Lim. Now, Dracul Mihawk is an insane addition to the Lim decks, right? Being able to restand a rested Odyssey type character as active and be able to swing with it once more can be so good, right? Especially with that on play. If you have a rested 5 cost or lower Odyssey character and then you play Mihawk, that's 2 rested characters on the field, and so you can restand that 5 cost character that you had, which could be something along the lines of Sabo, right? Sabo, something that we saw come out in OP10, is a 4 of in the Lim decks. You can, with the draw effect, right, swing with the Sabo, draw 1 card, because you have 3 or more rested cards, or rested characters, I should say, and then go ahead, use your leader effect maybe to play the Mihawk down, restand the Sabo, swing with the Sabo again to draw another card. Has just a lot of value. This is a great addition for the Lim decks, and one of the reasons that Lim gets so much better in this set, in my personal opinion, and one that you should be looking out for. But I don't generally see more than 2. I think it could be reasonable to go up to 4, right, in the deck, but I really just see 2. There's a lot of great cards that you want to include, and this is more so just like an end game kind of card, I feel like. Now, the Nami right here, although I think is really, really nice for being able to freeze one of your opponent's rested Dawn cards, this is limited to if you have 2 or more rested Odyssey type characters, right? If this was just 2 or more rested characters, I definitely put this in tier 2, right? Just green Straw Hat decks probably want to play green decks in general, might play this, right, as a 2K, a really nice 2K, but it's really just restricted to Lim in general. This one, though, oh, my apologies, you definitely want 4 of, right? This is a 4 of 2K in the Lim deck. This Lim as well is a nice 1-drop that is included in the Odyssey type decks. You're really utilizing this more for the second effect, right? Being able to stand one of your Odyssey type characters, right? As Lim plays everything rested, you can go ahead and restand one of them with that Lim effect, but this once per turn is a little less valuable, but still pretty good if the character is removed by an effect, right? You're probably never swinging with this, so if this gets to stay active on the field, you can go ahead and just keep utilizing this end of turn effect, and on this once per turn, like I was mentioning, if it leaves by one of your opponent's effects for any reason, you can just rest one of your Odyssey type characters instead, right? Could be a big Odyssey character, could be a small Odyssey character, but you're going to be able to have some survivability for this end of turn effect that you have, which is really good in a lot of situations. Now, I personally don't really think wait, what is this again? Gum Dragonfire Pistol Twister Star. It's an awful name. I personally don't think that this is very good in Lim. There's enough people that believe in it. I saw it a little bit in the early decks of OP10 play this card. It is a look at top 5, grab 2 Odyssey types, put the rest in your hand, but I feel like for resting 3, not playing a body, and you only net 1, it's just kind of like a worse Enel in some situations. Because you still net 1, but at least with Enel, you have a 6,000 power body on the field, and you can ramp. I will actually give a last second shout out to this Perona, right? When a character is rested by one of your effects set up to one of your Dawn cards as active, could have really good synergy with something like the Perona leader, right? Being able to do some restanding Dawn, but really good synergy with your leader effect, right? Being able to just rest a character outright. The reason that I almost wanted to leave this off the list, though, is because Gecko being banned. Gecko was a huge help to Perona, right? Gave a lot of value, and this would have had really good synergy with it, but, well, Gecko's banned now, so I don't even know if Perona's worth playing. I think Radio Knife is also really unique in some situations, right? Dressrosa Supernova Heart Pirates type can be played in some of those green Supernova decks that we have, with that main of resting a 6 cost or lower character and then KOing a rested 5 cost or lower character. Has that sort of same synergy with Edward Newgate that I was talking about earlier, where you can either rest and KO the same character, and by the way, 5 cost or less is not an unrespectable number, or you can go ahead and rest 1, KO another character on the field. You're not playing down a body, so that's why it's got a little bit higher numbers than something like Edward Newgate, but I think that there could be some niche value alongside this card. Also, with the trigger, resting a 4 cost is pretty good. Now, I will say I was originally going to leave this Marco out of this video, but with the new starter deck that's coming out and the potential for something like Red-Blue Marco to research back in the format, I feel like that this is kind of like an underrepresented card that you can grab, right? Being a 3 cost, 5,000 power, ready to attack on your second turn going first, it is a blocker, so a very respectable blocker, as well as having an on KO effect, which can include blocking, like I talked about earlier with Frankie. You can return one of your 4 cost opponent's characters. So think about this. Against Doflamingo, right? If you're something like Marco, you play this guy on curve on 3. Your opponent, Doflamingo, then goes ahead, uses leader effect, just attaches 3, swings 8 at lead, uses leader effect, maybe play something like Boa Hancock, right? Puts that Boa Hancock on the field, puts it to 9. Well, what you can do is go ahead, block with the Marco, and then that would force the Boa to go back into the Dofi's hand, right? This could be really, really interesting, I feel like, and something that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about as of yet, as we're kind of getting the early stages of exploring this post-ban list format, but definitely one that, especially if you're a Marco fan, I would keep your eye out. I would just have these in your back pocket. We've got another blocker with an on KO effect in Viola, right? This Viola, a nice blocker with an on KO effect of Dawn -1. If you've got a Donquixote Pirates type leader, being green purple Dofi or red purple Sugar, you can add a purple event card from your trash to your hand. Again, similar to the Senior Pink, just has really, really good synergy of just gaining back those event cards. Now, this is a Donquixote Pirates type restricted, which is why it's much lower than the Senior Pink, but I think you get the idea. Also, Foxy. This Foxy is in for a short time, I feel like, in Reiju decks, right, until OP11 releases, but if you want to play Reiju now, you can go ahead and include this card in your Foxy Pirate packages. Is a searchable 2K that you can have with the Porsche, right, is very, very nice, and has a activate main of trashing the character to where if you have equal or less than Dawn on your field, which you usually do as Reiju, you can go ahead and draw 1 card, right? So if you really need those cards, you can go ahead and utilize that for its activate main effect, right? Could be really, really nice against something like Blackbeard. I've also got little Blackbeards for you Sugar fans, right? Being a really interesting 3 cost counter event, being able to gain 4,000 is a lot of counter power, and then being able to draw on top of that if you fit the 7 or more Dawn or 5 or less cards in hand condition could actually be relatively easily with something like Sugar. Definitely a Sugar card, I would say, and definitely one that you want to include in a Sugar list, because those lists are usually generally pretty heavy anyways on the events. Oh, I almost forgot to talk about this Baby 5 right here. This Baby 5 is a Donquixote searchable 2K ride for purple, and then if you discard a card from your hand, you can actually ramp in your Dawn for Donquixote Pirates type decks as green, purple Dofi or Sugar. So this could see a little bit of play, especially in those decks, right? Searchable 2K ability to ramp, not going to complain about at all. Definitely going to be a consideration when you're looking at your 2K variety that you've got in your deck. Now, I saw this Nami pretty early, I feel like, in the Usopp decks, but has the ability to draw one and trash two with that activate main. So could be really, really nice for setting up your trash for different things, right? If you need a specific number, if you need like Frankie right setup and stuff like that. Unfortunately, doesn't really work with Straw Hat Pirates like the starter deck 14 Luffy, which I think would be so good for in some situations. But having that activate main could be really, really nice in a Blackbeard dominated format where your on play effects just don't work, right? So could be really, really nice tech for this developing meta that we have. Definitely one that you want to have your eye on. This Perona as well, I mean, man, tough stuff for Perona. If Perona or Gecko have any sort of potential to live after the 8-drop Gecko ban as well as the Ice Age ban, this card could make its way, right? Being a 4-cost 5,000 power character, being able to give a character other than Perona 2,000 power. Really, really good for Thriller Bark Pirates based decks, right? If Gecko stands a chance, it's definitely included in there. Giving a power boost to somebody could be really, really nice. You can play it off of your Leer effect, right? So could be really good. This for Yuma as well, man. Definitely really hurts seeing the Gecko ban, but for Dawn ×1 gains double attack, and especially a 4/6 stat line, right? One Dawn means 7,000 power character. Are you going to give up 2 cards from your hand, or are you going, or are like a seal right now, or are you going to allow 2 life to be taken from your side? Definitely an interesting one, especially with the introduction, I think, of Wano Country black characters, which could be cool for some future deck building and stuff like that, some future leaders that get announced. So I don't know, double attack seems pretty all right, especially for a Dawn ×1 and a 4/6 stat line. I've seen worse. Now this Rogue is a vanilla kind of character with a 1K counter. It's not even a 2K vanilla kind of character that we're seeing in OP11, but with that 5/7 stat line is really utilized in Eustace Captain Kidd, right? One of the different vanilla options that you probably use to be able to restand and become a blocker. Definitely the vanilla characters synergize really well with something like Eustace Captain Kidd. So if you're trying to play it post-ban list, post-release, this is definitely an option that you want to have alongside the other vanilla character that we've got in this set that you can use. This one I'm starting to see a little bit more in decks, especially as we progress more and more in the Eastern meta. Cavendish, right? Cavendish being a 6/8 vanilla also has beautiful pirates typing. So who knows, maybe we'll see some beautiful pirates typing in the future. But 6/8 is kind of the maximum side of these vanillas that you can have. 7/9, I think, being the max, but I don't think there's a 7/9 vanilla in this set or in the pool of cards that Supernova cards can use. Also is yellow Dressrosa, so something like the Law, who knows? And that's going to be all for this buy list. Let me know what other cards and decks you're excited about heading into the upcoming format as the cat walks around my desk and screen. And yeah, we'll see you later in the next video. Big news coming up. I'm excited to show much more videos on the way, and we'll see you later.